Hi, thanks for joining this study of Genesis. This is the 37th chapter. We're going to begin in verse 2. And in the previous video, we had studied verse 1, and so we'll pick up in verse 2. This is the story of Jacob, otherwise known as Israel, Joseph, his second to the last son, and his brothers, and the treatment of his brothers, treatment of Joseph by his brothers. What we see is, in reality of this, is that God in His sovereignty is preparing Joseph, excuse me, to be a redeemer for Israel, knowing what would go on. He's putting all these things in place, which looks like it's something very bad for Joseph at the time, but God preserves him, as we know. But during this time, it leads up to how Joseph got to where he was in Egypt. But the picture that's painted here is a picture that shows why his the carnal aspect of why his brothers hated him, why they were jealous of him and all that, and the fact that he was anointed for this, and what we'll see in this is we'll see some symbolism that very much shows Jacob, and of course being a redeemer of Israel, that in itself is symbolism of Christ and his redemption of Israel. And so we'll begin in verse 2. It says, "These are the generations of Jacob." And it says, "Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren, and he's with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah." Now, if you want to know who those are, we can look back at Genesis 35, verses 25 and 26. And the sons of Bilhah were Dan and Naphtali, and the sons of Zilpah were Gad and Asher. So he was in the field, and he was probably sent there as an observer to see what they were doing. And I don't know what these guys were up to, or the brothers, or perhaps they were not watching this flock at all. But anyway, it says here that Joseph brought into his father their evil report. So he didn't have, when Joseph came back, he didn't have anything good to say about what they were doing. And again, this begins to paint the picture of the interaction between his brothers and Joseph, and how they began to hate him because of their jealousy and just dislike for him, their scorn for him. It says in verse 3, "Now Joseph loved all of his children, but he loved Joseph more." In other words, he showed more favor towards Joseph. He showed more attention towards Joseph. And this, is again symbolic of Christ being God's anointed, being the Father's anointed. If we look at Matthew chapter 12, verse 18, we see it says, "Behold my servant whom I have chosen." This is a quote from Isaiah. "Behold my servant whom I have chosen, my beloved, in whom my soul is well pleased. I will put my spirit upon him, and he shall show judgment to the Gentiles." And so Christ is the chosen of God, and this of course, Joseph being the chosen or the favorite of Jacob. And so in doing so, his actions, and of course he says here in verse 3 that he made him a coat of many colors, and I can guess perhaps that was something to do with that, symbolized him being a princely nature, and exalted above his brothers. And so the dad didn't help any. Jacob didn't help any here, and finding favor with his brothers. And so this is a conflict that's growing. And it also symbolizes the conflict that when Christ came to this earth, how the Jews hated him because that he wasn't part of their establishment. He exposed their evil, and that's what Joseph was doing here. Is he exposed the evil of his brothers. And so we go on, and verse 4, and it says, his brothers saw that his father loved him more than all of his brothers. They hated him, and they could not speak peaceably with him. And so they didn't want anything to do with him. And again, so you see the same picture of when Christ came and how the Jews hated him, and there was this great conflict. Now, Joseph dreams a couple of dreams here, and so this is further the cause of the separation and growing strife between him and his brothers. And so he dreamed a dream, and it says, behold, in verse 7, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose and also stood aright, and behold, your sheaves stood around about and made obeisance to my sheaf. So their sheaves bowed to his, and he told his brothers this. He didn't keep himself. He said, hey, this is what happened. He wasn't ashamed of it. And God gave him this dream, and I'm not sure that he understood it, but he understood the fact that God was preparing him for something. What he didn't know exactly, I'm sure, but he did know that God was preparing. And his brother said, what do you mean you're gonna reign over us? Shall thou have dominion over us? Again, here's the Jews. They would not have Jesus to reign over them. They would reject him and ultimately crucify him. And here is a symbolism of him being king over Israel, the king of the Jews. And if you remember what we studied recently in John, where Pilate put a sign up on the cross that said, Jesus, King of the Jews, and the Jews come and said, hey, don't put King of the Jews, but that he said he was king. And so here again is that rejection by his brothers of Joseph, who will later become their Redeemer. And they hated him yet more for his dreams and for his words. In verse 9, he dreams another dream. And in this one, he told his brethren, but I have a dream to dream more, and behold, the sun and the moon and 11 stars bowed down to me. And he told his father and his brother, and his father rebuked him, and again his brethren disliked him, and his father asked him, what is this dream that's a dream? Shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come to bow down ourselves to thee on the earth? And his brother envied him, but his father observed or considered the saying. So his father wasn't so hasty to disregard what his dream was about, but he began to think about it. Now, in this case, I think the symbolism here, in the case before, is showing that he, in fact, is king over Israel. But in this one, I think when you talk about the sun and the moon and all, that you see that he is Lord over all creation. He is Lord over all things, both the sun, the moon, and all the created world. And so, in this case, of course, that in fact his dad would need to look to him for him to be his Redeemer as well, that being Jacob. And so here we see the picture, being complete of how much that the brothers hated him. So what happened is, in the next verses, that Jacob decides to send Joseph once again to the field to observe what his brothers saw. Here he's been sent forth, all right, as a father sends forth his son. And it says, and Israel said to Joseph in verse 13, did not thy brethren feed the flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send thee unto them. And he said unto him, here am I. So he was obedient. He didn't make an argument. He knew his brothers hated him, but he didn't make any argument. And the same thing, about Christ, is Christ came willingly. Christ came, he gave up his lordship, his deity, his place in heaven to come to this earth. And so did Joseph in this way, that he didn't make argument with his father, but he was obedient in every way. And he said, here am I, send me. And so anyway, he goes, and verses 15 through 17, as he's looking for his brethren, and they finally find him. There's brethren in Dothan. In verse 18, and when they saw him from afar off, even before he came near to them, they conspired against to slay him. So here you see again the types and the shadows of Christ and the Jews, to where they desired to kill him without a cause. And they said to one another, "Behold, the dreamer comes." And verses 20, "Come now, therefore, and let us slay him and cast him into some pit, and we will say, Some evil beast has devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams." Now Reuben, one of his other brothers, heard it, and he said, "Hey, let's don't kill him, but let's just throw him in the pit, and with the intention that later he would come back and rescue him and take him home." And so, of course, they threw him in the pit, and then we get to verse 25, and it says, "When they sat down to eat bread, they lifted up their eyes and looked, behold, a company of Ishmaelites came from Gilead with their camels bearing spicery and balm and myrrh, and going to carry it down to Egypt." So again, we talked about the sovereignty of God, and that how God is put Joseph in this predicament, which illustrates that contrary to what we would see as being things that would be positive in our lives, sometimes that God does use the circumstances of our lives, such as He used the circumstances of Joseph's and his hatred of his brothers, who sold him to this band of merchants that were headed down to Egypt to sell goods. And I can only imagine what went on in this conversation. What did they have his mouth taped shut? What was he saying? Who knows? But here we have, what was he sold for? 20 shekels of silver. Now, of course, Judas betrayed Christ for 30 shekels of silver. But nevertheless, here again is symbolism, being sold into captivity, sold into slavery. And so they sold him into slavery, and they wiped their hands and said, "Man, we're done with this. We've got rid of this guy." And what happened is that they thought that this was the end. They'd gotten rid of the problem, just as when they sent Christ, when they crucified him. They thought, we've gotten rid of this person who has given us so much trouble, and we've redeemed God from all of this, and we've gotten rid of this troublemaker, this blasphemer, and so too they thought, we've gotten rid of this dreamer. And so they sold him off, and then they of course they fake the death by taking a kid from the flock of goats, shedding the blood of that kid, and dipping his coat of many color, his tunic, into that, and then sending him back to his father. And so when we get to the last verse, what we find out in verse 36 is that when they got there, the Midianites sold him into Egypt, into Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh's and captain of the guards. So here's God continue to move in this situation, and God's beginning to set up Joseph for to be a prince and to be a redeemer. So I think it's really interesting to see all of the symbolism that's shown in the Old Testament towards what ultimately would be the Redeemer in Christ, and Joseph being that person, how God set him apart. God set him apart for that particular role in history, and particularly in the role in the redemption and taking care of Israel, so that the seed would be preserved until ultimately the chosen seed, the one and only Son of God, Jesus Christ, would come to this earth. And so there is the study and the completion of the study of Genesis chapter 37. So we'll start 38 in our next study. So thank you for watching, and I pray that God would use this word and His word to richly bless your life. Thank you for watching.